Hey Mike, how are you doing today? Thanks for meeting with me again.
I'm well, I guess, most part.
That's good. So we're gonna set a timer again or whatnot, just so we don't go around time for the session or
Okay.
whatever. But last time we did meet and we did talk, we talked a little bit about your anxiety and different coping skills and mechanisms you can do. We
hmm
also came up with a plan as to what you were going to do and some homework assignments or whatnot. So just tell me how you've been feeling lately. How's your anxiety been feeling lately?
Uh, well, again, like I tend to avoid anxiety-inducing situations. So, you know, um, there are some things I can't avoid, like having driving traffic or encountering difficult people at work. So,
Hmm.
for the most part, I think I've been able to stay on a pretty even kilter.
Okay, cool. So I mean, what have you been doing? To help with that.
So I've been when I do experience anxiety or
Hmm.
I feel angry sometimes. I
Hmm.
realize that okay, why am I angry? Okay, so I'm anxious about something. What am I anxious about? And usually it's something that like it's when when I'm dealing with somebody who's particularly difficult at work.
Okay.
One gentleman kept questioning me uh, when we were trying to transfer him to another unit.
Hmm.
And he was asking questions that were basically challenging to the competence of his nursing staff. And
Hmm.
he was kind of putting me on the spot. And I could feel like, getting a little bit of butterflies, my heart rate kind of going up, starting to like get a little bit annoyed with him.
Hmm.
And I realized that that was when okay, I'm experiencing anxiety here. So what do I need to do? I just took a deep breath, blew it out, and then practiced redirection. Asked him if he felt like he was confident that the staff was capable of taking care of him up to this point, and
Hmm.
he changed his tune. He said, "Yeah." He said he was just nervous about what
Hmm.
was happening to him, and
Hmm.
so on and so forth. So I mean, I get maybe it's almost like anxiety is catching, right? So
Absolutely,
he's
absolutely,
anxious and
absolutely.
he's like acting in a way that
Right,
like now I'm becoming anxious. So
right.
being able to identify that, and I immediately went down, after the call, and I wrote down the time and
Hmm.
what I experienced and how I was
Hmm.
feeling. Um, it's been helping to write things down
Okay,
and
I'm
and
glad
then
that.
and then think about it later on.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, kind of like taking something of a personal inventory and recognizing that okay, there's a lot of automatic thinking involved in the way that I experience
Hmm.
anxiety because I'm operating on some kind of assumption,
Right.
right? And sometimes the assumption's pretty accurate,
Hmm.
but sometimes it's not, and I need to take action to improve me. So
Right.
it's been helpful.
I'm glad, and I'm glad it's helping. I'm glad we were able to come up with that the last time we had our last session or whatever. So what I'm hearing you saying is that when you definitely feel yourself having or feeling having like one of those anxiety moments, that you're definitely able to catch it head on before it actually escalates or anything worsen. And it seems like the deep breathing seems to help. Do you feel like deep breathing exercises is one way that definitely helps with you when you begin to feel that way when you're in a situation where you possibly can't get to writing it down right away?
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, uh, I have to ride my bicycle from Camden Yards to the medical center.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm doing that, I'm riding on the road in
Mm-hmm.
the city. Now, ordinarily, I leave very, very early so I don't have to deal with any traffic. But the other day, I had a night shift.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to ride in traffic coming in, and then I had to ride in traffic the next morning going out.
How was that for you?
That is pretty nerve wracking
Hmm.
because I mean it's dangerous
Yeah.
regardless of whether you can't ride your bicycle on the sidewalk because that's dangerous to the pedestrians, and then uh, riding in traffic. I have to obey all the laws, make sure I'm signaling my turns and everything else, and I I know that there are a significant number of people out there driving that feel bicycles shouldn't be on the road at all.
Hmm.
So they completely ignore you and they cut you off or run you off the road or what
Hmm.
have you. So and speeders and people who think that their horn is a remote control for
Mhm.
the person in front of them.
Mhm.
Uh, the loud noise, everything, and I get a little bit triggered, and I can feel like the anxiety creeping up in
Creeping
my
up on you.
chest,
Okay.
and I know what the cause is. I mean, I immediately know what the cause
Mhm.
is because I know I'm subjecting myself to a
Right.
dangerous situation.
Right.
So yeah, the physical exercise itself is helpful as well.
I'm sure it is. I'm
But
sure it is.
but yeah, the deep breathing really works right there in the moment when I'm going through it.
Oh,
So
I'm glad. I'm glad that. I'm glad that works, man. And I mean, continue to do that. That's something that definitely works for you. The last time we did talk, the first time we met, the one thing you were very cautious about and concerned about was the big, large crowds, and going into big crowds and
oh
things
yeah.
like that. So how has that been working for you
Um,
since our last session?
again, I'm still like kind of avoiding that
Hmm.
as much as possible.
Okay.
But like even like when the games let out at the
Hmm.
same time my shift is over and I
Yeah.
have to get on the light rail, there's
Hmm.
just swarms and swarms of people.
Yeah.
And I know that the only way I'm going to get home is to get on that train, so I
Hmm.
have to be in that crowd.
Right.
And yeah, I can feel it. The same thing. It's only happened a couple of times since our last session, but like as the warmer weather creeps up, it's going to get worse. There's going to be more frequent games and events and everything else happening in the city, so I'm probably going to deal with it a bit more.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Um, but yeah, the same thing, and that uh, because I'm like in the situation and I have
Hmm.
the opportunity, I can just go into my pack, pull out the papers that I'm recording on, and actually write down what I'm experiencing right then.
Okay, so why don't you tell me a little bit, Mike, about you said you wrote down some times and things like
Hmm.
so. What was the most recent event that occurred, and when writing that, explain to me exactly what has been
Well,
going on with your
the
writing.
most recent event was the one that I described
Right.
about the patient
Okay.
that was asking a lot
Okay.
of
Cool.
challenging
So what exactly
questions.
did you write down?
Basically, that okay, I began to experience feelings of anger and annoyance, which I then realized were my reaction to anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote down on my paper, the
Mm-hmm.
time, the day, like right after it happened. I came back
Mm-hmm.
to the office. I sat down. I wrote
Mm-hmm.
everything down. And I mean, I haven't been using a notebook, which was what you recommended,
Yeah.
but I've been like doing it on scratch paper and on note paper as I go along
Mm-hmm.
and putting it into a folder
Well, I
because
mean, paper works. I mean, pen and paper works fine. So I mean, probably even easier to just grab a pen and piece of paper to
yeah,
write on.
it's just
So
the most
I'm sure it's
convenient
fine.
thing for me. I mean, carrying around the extra stuff in my
Mm-hmm.
pocket all the time, I'll end up losing it,
Mm-hmm.
or it's just easier for me to do it this way, and it seems to be working fairly well. Um, and again, like just the act of recognition, realizing what it is that I'm feeling, and how it's impacting me and my outward behavior. I can sit and and uh, and work through the process. Recognizing
Mm-hmm.
that I really, oftentimes in many situations where I feel
Mm-hmm.
fearful,
Mm-hmm.
really don't have anything to fear.
Okay.
So I recognize that, like, that whole, it's basically something that's not rational. It may
Mm-hmm.
be reasonable because there's always a potential you could be harmed, one way or another, particularly
Yeah.
in a large city where traffic is crazy and there's, violent crime and everything
Mm-hmm.
else. But like, those are typically isolated events that really don't, uh, really aren't something that you have to worry about all the time.
Right.
So yeah, just recognizing that some of the things that I'm getting anxious over
Mm-hmm.
are really not uh, perceptibly that real. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
I'm making any
No,
sense
you're
or not.
definitely making definitely good sense.
It's
Absolutely, you're making clear sense.
so actually going through this process helps me to realize, okay, well, like this guy was just scared himself,
Mm-hmm.
and the challenges that he was issuing were just his means of coping with the same kind of feelings I'm experiencing.
Right.
It's just, like he manifests a little bit
Yeah.
different. So why am I getting angry? Why am I feeling anxious over this when what I should be doing is like trying to help allay his fears?
Mm-hmm.
So I realize the potential that this is going to make me more effective in my position to
Mm-hmm.
go through this process and learn how to cope a little bit better for myself.
Okay, cool. Now, do you feel like your anxiety a lot of times, Michael, just come from, just you may just be perceiving a situation to be worse than what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's precisely what my experience has been. You said
Mm,
it better than I could.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And sometimes, that happens, because we perceive things to be one way without completely actually knowing right away. So we tend to kind of get ourselves kind of worked up over it or whatever because we kind of trying to prepare for the worst. So we just like leading a blind man to the water, he can't see it. So it's like he's preparing himself, what I mean, for the worst. In reality, it's not the worst. So I'm glad that you're able to recognize and have recognized, when you're feeling your anxiety get almost trying to get the best of you, and the fact that you have learned how to develop some skill sets such as journaling and or deep breathing to help with that. So when you have those experiences, there are times when you get back to yourself. Do you ever just go back and just look at what you wrote and just like read through it or whether to actually also help you get through the process to even like calm you down even more?
So yeah, there are times, and I know I mentioned prayer the last time we
Hmm.
talked.
Yes, you did.
Um, so I go back and I look at what's been written, and if I can
Hmm.
see like a continuous theme, and the number one theme that seems to crop up for me related to anxiety is
Hmm.
fear and anger,
Hmm.
and my anger is my reaction to fear.
Hmm.
So one of the things that I do, in addition to like in the moment when I cannot escape,
Hmm.
um, I'm if I have the opportunity, I'm writing right then and there, and
Hmm.
I'm going through the process of recognizing whether or not is it a rational fear, is it an
Hmm.
irrational fear,
Hmm.
and do I need to feel this way? Why am I having this reaction that that's like fight or flight or
Hmm.
what have you? Why is this happening to me? Is there a legitimate threat, or is it just a misperception? Am I seeing something that's not there, or just feeling something that's not there?
Hmm.
Is it a challenge to my beliefs? Is it a
Hmm.
challenge to my survival? Right.
Hmm.
So I'm going through this process uh, fairly uh, regularly and recognizing that more often than not, it's a matter of perception. Right.
Hmm.
So personality, what have you. And when I do this, uh, it works, right? But then later, when I go back through and I look through, I can see, okay, well, what are the not so, uh, what is not unreal? What is a concrete cause? What actually is a legitimate threat to my survival? What
Hmm.
what actually what actually is a threat to my belief system or
Hmm.
what have you? And I go through and I find that oftentimes even those can simply be indicative of the flaws in my character.
Hmm.
So then I use prayer. I talk to God and ask Him
Hmm.
to take those flaws away
Hmm.
and to help me become the person I need to be.
Do you feel like prayer has worked with that when it comes to that?
Um, yeah, yeah. Actually, I am a true believer in
Hmm.
an Almighty Creator,
Hmm.
and I believe that prayer gives us the power to communicate with that Creator. And yeah, um, talking to God to me and asking for that kind of help to be a better person, to
Hmm.
be able to uh, be an instrument of God's will uh, is very helpful.
Okay.
I want to approach everything as I best I can with compassion,
Hmm.
understanding, empathy, the things that you need to be a good caregiver.
Absolutely, and I'm quite sure you would do great at it. So sounds like Mike, you know what I mean, from the last session, you definitely are finding and understanding your anxiety better. You definitely have found good coping skills and what actually works for you in those heated moments. So whether not when you are having, those anxiety is getting to you. I think for the next session, I want you to do for a homework assignment for me, if you can. Just when you go home, I want you to write down, what is a threat to you and what is your fears? If you could just make a list of that,
Threats and fears.
threats and fears or whatnot, then we can talk about that a little bit, when you come back or whatnot. That
Well,
sound like a
yeah,
plan?
yeah, sure, yeah. I think one of my worst fear, and it's funny because like, you know, the number one most highly decorated combat veteran of World War II, Audie Murphy, had the exact same fear.
Absolutely.
His greatest fear, and my greatest
Hmm.
fear, is being perceived as a coward.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd
I can.
rather die than have people look at me and see someone who is fearful.
Yeah, yeah,
But that's a fear in itself. It's
yeah.
just ridiculous.
I can only imagine how that makes you feel.
Well, I mean, being aware of it helps, but
Yeah,
I know there's process and steps I
absolutely.
got to go through.
Well, it's good that you said that, so next time we can talk about that as well too. You know what I mean? So we can talk about that, and then also, like I said, go home and write down a list of your fears and what poses a threat to you, and we can definitely talk more and elaborate more about that. Okay?
Sure,
Sounds like a plan.
you
All
got
right,
it.
thanks, man.
Thank
Thanks for meeting
you.
with me. All right, thanks, Mike.